Good morning, Energy Media readers. Today we're going to be talking about greenhouse gas emissions, which is on everybody's mind and certainly in the public discourse. And joining me today is Dave Sawyer, who's an economist with EnviroEconomics, and he wrote a blog piece on February 13th that really caught my attention. Welcome to the interview, Dave.
Morning, thanks for having me.
Now, in your blog post, you were reading a report on I think it was a Canadian government report on GHG emissions from 2019, and you noticed something very interesting that hasn't received a lot of public attention. What was that?
Well, buried deep on page 144 of this report that gets submitted to the United Nations every 2 years by the Government of Canada, it's basically our emission forecast. Where are we with respect to our 2030 target? And I noticed on page 144 that electricity, the non-emitting generation from electricity, the share of non-emitting electricity relative to fossil electricity hit 90%. And there's a bit of a surprise because the only other target the Government of Canada has, other than this 2030 NDC, nationally determined contribution, our 2030 target, is this 90% non-emitting generation target. So the idea is that policies, roll forward and hit this target.
So are we talking about 90% low or no emitting power generation, hydro, wind, solar, whatever it might be, nuclear, right, by 2030? Or have we achieved that already? I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So, right, it's important because the forecast indicates that we are on track to hit that target. So currently, we're probably sitting at just under 85%, sort of 82 to 85%. But to put that into perspective, in 2005, we were at 61%. So since 2005, we've got Ontario, Nova Scotia, and a bunch of other jurisdictions phasing out fossil generation. So we sort of had this big step change to about 2015, and then it sort of is set flat for the last few years. Yeah.
Well, this may be, in fact, the first climate target that Canada has ever hit. Is that the case?
It seems to be the first target we're on track to hit because, forecasts are highly uncertain. I mean, what's interesting about this forecast is that it's the same group of modelers and the same models doing the same analysis year over year. So just last year, we weren't even close to the target. The forecast was about 85%. So there is a step change in just 1 year, which reflects a bunch of new policy.
Now, this is very interesting, of course, because really what we're talking about is the phasing out of coal power generation. Alberta and Nova Scotia, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, are the big culprits here, with Saskatchewan as well. Yeah. And one of the things I've noticed about Alberta is they were supposed to phase out all of the coal power generation by 2030. And a number of the utilities, ATCO comes to mind, basically said, look, the economics of renewables now and gas are so good compared to coal, we're going to phase out those coal plants even earlier than we had thought. I think 2021, 2022. Yeah. Are those the kind of policies and utility decisions that you're talking about?
Well, yeah, expectations really matter here. So when you're sitting there as a generator and you're looking into the future, in Alberta, let's say, you've got a federal regulation to phase out coal and a binding constraint on new natural gas. And then in Alberta, you have a phase out obligation and then a bunch of incentives with the output-based pricing, the new tier program, CCIR, Ester, so basically pricing, carbon pricing and elec. And you're looking forward, and yeah, it was amazing how quick the fossil generation dropped in Alberta in 2017.
I've been a very big critic of the new tier program in Alberta that was brought in by the Jason Kenney UCP government, mainly because it diluted the impact of carbon pricing on large emitters in the oil sands. But credit where credit's due, tier is an improvement over the Notley government's carbon competitive incentive regulations when it comes to the power sector.
Yeah, and it's an improvement over the federal government benchmark for coal-fired power as well. So it exceeds the federal benchmark, the same sort of benchmark. So yeah, absolutely. There are strong incentives in Alberta to move away from fossil generation, and that's what we're seeing.
So if generally when I read economists talking about GHG levels, we're talking about GHG emissions from the power generation sector, the transportation sector, the industrial sector, and the building sector. So it appears by 2030 we'll have hit our targets for the power generation and distribution sector. What about those other three sectors?
Yeah, that's interesting. So what we're seeing in the electricity sector, so a rapid decline from about 120 megatons of emissions in 2005 down to 50 now, down to 20 megatons in the forecast. So these are, these are year-over-year decline rates in the order of 7%. In the rest of the economy, we're seeing maybe minus 1%. In oil and gas, since 2005, we're seeing plus 34% historical, right? So it is spotty, and certainly this electricity fall is unique to Canada's emission inventory.
Dave, this is fascinating, and I'm sure that my readers who are big, they recognize climate change, accept the science, and understand that we have to get our emissions down. So my readers will be very pleased to hear some good news on this front. Any final thoughts on the report that you're referring to?
Well, no, interties are the big thing. That was the only other thing I didn't mention. So, clean energy into Manitoba, or from Manitoba to Saskatchewan into Alberta, is also a big contributor here. It's not just the carbon pricing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So yeah, thank you.
Dave, thank you very much for this. We look forward to chatting with you in the future about Canada's GHG targets and some of the policies that are working and not working and what we need to do. And I will be calling on you again because I wrote a column immediately after the federal election, and of course where we had commitments by 3 of the parties to get to net zero in 2050 for the country. And the point of my column was that those targets all run through Alberta. And so we need to keep talking about this, and I'll look forward to your insights.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to chat.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.